Hello everyone, Kibler here. Today I wanted to talk a bit about Mercenaries. Obviously, it's sort of the hot new thing in the Hearthstone universe these days, and it has been kind of a point of contention for a lot of people in the community. Not everyone loves the mode, but we saw that same thing at the release of Battlegrounds. A lot of people saying, why is this even in Hearthstone? What's the relationship? I want to play Hearthstone. Don't spend your time developing this auto battler game mode, RNG Fiesta, yada yada. And that, of course, has become an incredibly popular mode. And I think that there's a lot of potential for Mercenaries as well. I do have to say that I have been enjoying Mercenaries much more than I thought I would. When I first saw it, felt like it was something. Okay, maybe I'll kind of screw around with this a little bit on my phone or tablet or whatever before I kind of get bored of it and just stop playing. But it has kind of held my attention for longer than I really expected, and I still have stuff that I want to explore in the game mode. But today I wanted to talk a bit about not just like hype up Mercenaries, right? This isn't a hashtag ad shill video or anything like that. And I want to talk about some of the things that I would like to see improved in the game mode. One of the things that just sort of jumps off to me out of the bat, which is commentary that a lot of people have had, is that the game kind of feels empty in a lot of the boards. Like once you actually get into the fights, there's just a lot of empty space. And it feels like that could be utilized for something. And I've seen some people say, oh, well, it seems perfect on phone. And great. I think that this is a game that lends itself better to being a mobile game than it does something that you're necessarily playing on PC. One of the things that I actually really like about the game is the fact that it is this sort of turn-based thing that doesn't involve other players unless you want to jump into PvP, that you can kind of do at your own pace. And I think that's something that appeals to an audience that doesn't necessarily get served by most of what exists in Hearthstone now, whether in Constructed or in Battlegrounds. Previously, there were the fairly limited single-player game modes, and now with the release of Mercenaries, there's a game mode that feels like you can progress and have this sort of dopamine spike of, hey, I leveled up, I did whatever that improved my team or my units or whatnot, without having to play against other players. And that is, I think, something that appeals to different player types, and frankly, I think is one thing that a lot of people who are kind of hating on Mercenaries aren't really appreciating, is that this isn't necessarily a game for them. If you're someone who really cares deeply about the competitive aspect of Battlegrounds or Constructed Ladder or whatever, maybe this isn't the game mode for you. But even in that sense, I've seen a lot of competitive players, a lot of pro players like Frozen or Luna, who are playing and really enjoying the PvP element. So I think that once you sort of get to that point, there is definitely that kind of sense of competition as well. But it is something that you can just kind of casually play while you're watching TV or whatever. And I think that is not a negative like a lot of people have suggested. They're like, oh, this is kind of boring and mind-numbing. You don't even have to pay attention for some of it. And that's true, and that I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. There are enough challenging aspects of the game once you sort of get to them that I feel like it's good that there are things that you can kind of do to pass the time in the game mode kind of at your own pace. I had people in my chat say, oh, this is great. I have a kid. It's hard for me to pay attention through, always getting, through my turn in Battlegrounds or in Standard. And this is something I can just do at my own pace. And I think that is a valuable thing for people to have in the Hearthstone experience, even if it's not traditional Hearthstone. That said, I do think that there can be some improvements in that as well. One of the things that I have really, early on even, kind of struggled with was just the sheer amount of loading time versus game time. Especially if, it's something that you are kind of farming stuff, going through and doing encounters that aren't necessarily particularly challenging. The amount of time that's spent in like the searching for opponent thing or the animations, like when you beat a bounty, right? It uses the same kind of animation structure of the single player maps. The single player like adventures, right, where it goes like blink, 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 bah, like chest opens. And if you're like kind of farming stuff, that kind of animation time on every single run you do kind of gets annoying. And I get that you want to have something that, like, for especially the first time you do a zone, it's like, this cool exciting reward, and we use this animation thing to make it seem special. And that's the sort of code that already exists in Hearthstone because it is from the single player adventures. so you can just use it rather than having to make something new. But when you're doing the same zone over and over, it kind of gets tedious. Similarly, I think this might have been changed somewhat because I've seen it happen less. The diamond portraits that you get with the bundles, with their emotes, just slow down the process of doing stuff because they won't shut up. I did think that since the release they may like talk less. It may have been like hotfix to make them actually talk less, or maybe I'm just using them less in my compositions. But it actually feels like you're getting something with a drawback by getting the diamond portrait for things if what you're trying to do is farm zones and get the rewards and things quickly, and that's kind of frustrating. And if those could be uncoupled from the round timers, like happen in the middle of the round while things are happening, rather than being a thing that happens at the end or something, or you could just turn them off, or you could just get the basic game character skin with the diamond skins. You could at least switch to the basic skin, but you don't. You only get the diamond one from the bundle, so that's kind of annoying. But sort of on this note, the farming aspect of the game, I've had people who bring up, in my chat when I've been streaming, and I do want to note, I don't necessarily feel like this is a particularly friendly streaming game. It doesn't really have kind of the big exciting moments of like a constructed game or a battlegrounds game. You have no pop-off thing where you like yog someone, or you like get an insane triple super early or whatever, and like most of it is kind of the same thing. Even when you kind of get the end game type stuff of PvP or the PvE encounters, there's some puzzle solving, which is interesting, and I feel like it will make for good like strategy guide type YouTube content. But I don't think it's great like, hey, just watch me play this game and a bunch of exciting and fun moments happen, because a lot of the gameplay is farming. And I've seen people criticize that, like, oh, it's very grindy. It's like, yes, it is, and that's kind of the point of a game like this. There is a lot of you're going through and just trying to unlock stuff and power up your characters, and that is the gameplay rather than necessarily just kind of the lead up to the gameplay. Obviously, like the unlocking of cards in, say, traditional Hearthstone, you can feel grindy, but that's like you could just buy some packs and get those cards instead. In this, there's not like the sort of pay to win of like, okay, I get all the cards, now I have an advantage. There is like okay, you can get all of the units, but you still need to level up your units. You still need to unlock their equipment with tasks and get the coins for them. Obviously, you can get more of those through purchasing packs, but I'm not here to really criticize the business model. If anything, in terms of this style of game, this is vastly the least kind of pay-to-win version of this kind of like gacha style game that I've ever seen, because there's a fairly reasonable limit on how powerful the characters get based on just accumulating more stuff past a certain point, and that certain point is like not that hard to reach by just sort of playing the game. And a lot of these games like kind of have uncapped power potential for the units, that if you just spend more, they just are more powerful endlessly. And that is a very pay-to-win experience, and I don't think this is. It is a pay-to-get stuff faster and have more options than people, but that's kind of a lot of the model of these style of any kind of collectible game anyway, whether it's a TCG or the gacha style we're dealing with here. Kind of getting back to the original point that I was kind of before I went on the tangent there. The farming element of the game is something that it's not that I don't like farming, because I do think that having something that you can do to kind of pass the time is something that is a enjoyable game experience at a certain point. I do dislike the fact that it seems like the best thing to do right now, specifically if you're trying to unlock tasks, just for anyone out there who's not really familiar with Mercenaries and the progression of Mercenaries, you need to unlock tasks for a particular unit in order to unlock that unit's equipment, as well as potentially get coins to be able to level up that unit's abilities and equipment. And currently, the best way to get tasks is to continuously reset these low-level zones. Basically, Air Elemental Heroic is the one that a lot of people have sort of settled on as being the fastest, because you only have 2 or even sometimes 1 fight before you get to a mystery, and then that could potentially be a Mysterious Stranger, which can give you a task for one of the mercs in your party. And doing that over and over and over is not a particularly compelling experience. It's not particularly compelling gameplay. The problem is that that's just the best way to do it. It's not that this is just the easiest way to do it. It at least from what I have read and experienced myself, it's just the most efficient way to do it, period. It's just the best. And that kind of stinks. I wish that there were more incentives to do more challenging, more compelling and interesting, engaging content. Doing the later, more difficult content is not remotely close to as rewarding in the key metrics of stuff like unlocking the tasks for your mercenaries, which is one of the things that really gates you in terms of your ability to do stuff, whether in the PvE stuff or the PvP stuff, because you need to unlock this equipment to be as effective as possible. So I'd love to see a way to make a better balance between the more difficult content that is more engaging. Like I like doing that more than I like just like pressing the button and auto farming essentially. I'd love to see a way to make that a better balance. Like maybe there are more opportunities or much better chance for these strangers to appear later on in the more difficult things. Maybe you get like multiple tasks for multiple different guys in the later ones, so it's a better risk reward, time reward ratio. Or if the goal is, okay, we just want there to be this sort of trivial farming is the best way to do it, give us like an auto battle type feature. Like it's particularly annoying to go through the load time I was talking about of, hey, here's the spin thing, here's the map up here, and now you have to, every single battle you go, you have to like, okay, I click this guy's ability, I click this guy's ability, and these are all irrelevant because I'm going to win every single time, right? Because it's I'm incredibly over leveled and overstated for this. But just having to like, I drag this ability here and like just figuring out, okay, I'll just use Ragnaros because it's just one button. So I just press one button and kill them all. And that's kind of still pretty tedious. I don't want like battle 40 times thing like exists in some of these other farming style games. Those are usually energy gated in order to allow you to do that kind of thing. Whereas, this doesn't have energy, which is great. You can play as much as you want. But you don't have to sort of auto refresh, continue these sort of things. But yeah, I feel like it's tedious to have to do the same trivial content over and over and over. And I would prefer if there was a better way to do it, either through auto or preferably through just getting better rewards through later stage stuff. Speaking of the later stage stuff, I've actually, early on, I was like, oh, most of this content feels very trivial. Once I got into the later stage, like PvE content, like the Blackrock Mountain stuff specifically, it started to actually get very engaging and very interesting. So props to the team for that design. I think the later bosses, are very cool and trying to figure out how to beat them, figure out the best combination of units and treasures to try to assemble in order to actually do that. That said, I do have some criticisms of some of those designs. It is really annoying to not have the ability to view your team when you're choosing a treasure during a bounty. Choosing a treasure, it's like, oh, you choose a treasure, it's like your human characters get bonus. And you're like, okay, well, what was my team again? How many of them are human? It should just be, you can view your team when you're choosing a treasure. Very easy stuff. In addition, there are treasures that affect Horde and Alliance only, and there's no indication on the units whether they're Horde or Alliance. And for me, that's not a problem, right? I played World of Warcraft. I recognize what units are what, but not everyone did. In fact, I imagine a far lower percentage of players for Mercenaries who are trying to come into this more kind of casual, friendly type game will have that background in World of Warcraft, and having a core mechanic of gameplay that's something that's entirely opaque to them is a pretty big mistake. So I think that having like a little banner on them or something, or having them somehow, you can view your team and have them all highlighted when you mouse over, even if you don't want to have iconography that doesn't necessarily exist in the client already. Just highlight them with a glow that you use for like Reno effects or like this thing is active type effects. When you have that party view, it shows these are the ones that are affected by it, so that people don't need to just kind of guess, because that really sucks. Just having that more information is another thing specifically that I'd love to see in PvP. The PvP mode is more engaging than I thought it would be. And I do find it a little bit frustrating, this is a side note to this, how much time it takes to get to the point that it feels like your units are relevant in PvP. I think that especially early on, you saw a lot of just like the same Thrall, Samuro, Zarella compositions, because that's just what people had. And yeah, obviously any sort of metagame evolving with people acquiring new stuff is cool. But like, if I'm like, oh, I want to try this combo, it's like, okay, well now I have to grind a ton to get my guy to the point that it's able to be relevant, because I need to unlock the task 7 treasure and then get the coins to make it powerful enough to go up against other players. And it's really difficult to like jump in and tweak your party, because the level of investment in an individual unit is extremely high. So if someone is very heavily invested in PvP, they need to, by default do a ton of the PvE mode, which I think is okay. The game isn't necessarily PvP focused, and it's its own entire entity that involves both of these game modes. But I do feel like the amount of effort required, not just to level up your units, but even to get to the ELO rating, the ranking level, to regularly face actual opponents. I have to imagine that a lot of people just kind of abandon PvP before they get there, because the amount of time investment that it takes to not only get your units up, but also actually get to the point that you're no longer primarily facing bots. I think a lot of people are just going to quit before then, at least quit PvP. And I think that's kind of a shame, and I wish that there was I don't know a great way to necessarily fix that, because I do think the existence of bots at the various stages in order to give people what feel like fair matchups is very important. I see people criticize, like, oh, there's just bots in PvP. Why would they do that? It's like, well, because going up into PvP and just being randomly paired with someone who's either vastly more powerful or vastly weaker than you is a frustrating experience. And also just waiting an extremely long period of time to get a close matchup waiting for another player is also a frustrating experience. So I like the existence of the bots to a certain extent, but I wish that the rating gain was faster to get you out of that bracket where you largely face bots and aren't guaranteed, or at least more likely to face human players at the higher ranks. I just wish that was a faster experience, because I don't want to go in and be like, whether I'm streaming or just playing, and face 4 bots in a row, and I'm just like, okay, well, this is just kind of lame, kind of boring, right? But when I do get into those matches against players, I really would love to be able to see what my opponent's abilities do. This is one thing that's hugely, hugely important for PvP, is knowing not just the basics of, hey, what are their kind of general abilities, but the specific cooldown and time, speed, whatever it is, speed. It's called speed, not time. The cooldown and speed of their abilities and what they do, because in order to, this is very much a full information type game. You need to be able to make your decisions with information that you should have. And you shouldn't have to pull up, a PDF of everything on the screen next to you, or use an add-on. I feel like I can't PvP on my iPad, because I just don't know all the information. I can use Deck Track or whatever to have it when I'm playing my PC, but it's not like Battlegrounds where it's it's very advantageous to know your opponent's composition, when the last time you faced them, what it looked like, which you do get through a deck tracker. You can still play totally reasonably. Same thing with Constructed. You can play totally reasonably, not having full deck tracker of what your opponents played and what you played. You really can't play Mercenaries PvP without knowing the abilities of the units to a very precise level, because it is so deterministic in terms of yes, I will do this because this is the fastest thing. This will happen, and then this will happen. You got to know. Right? And that almost encyclopedic level of information of the damage values and the speeds and the cooldowns of every unit's abilities is just an unreasonable burden to have on players who want to play PvP on something other than a PC with Deck Tracker. So I would love to see more information displayed for players. You hover your mouse over the unit, it shows you their abilities. It already shows you, their treasure, on their card, but I'd love to just be able to mouse over a unit and see their abilities and their cooldowns, so that I don't just have to guess or remember, because either of those kind of sucks. That's kind of where I'm at with Mercenaries. Like I said, I've liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I doubt that I will be doing a ton of Mercenaries content, simply because, as I said, it doesn't really lend itself to the big exciting moments. It's more of a, hey, I'm going to farm through this stuff and maybe share my strategies and tips with you. That's the sort of thing that I may do on the channel here, but if there's more that you'd like to hear from me about Mercenaries, or kinds of content that you'd like to see, whether it's this, Mercenaries, Constructed, whatever, let me know. I do actually have a lot of cool stuff that's coming down the pipeline for you all, that I will be revealing in the not-so-distant future. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, or whatever you do on YouTube. And let me know what you think about Mercenaries, as well as my opinions on the game mode. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.